In this Wargaming Tactica vlog, we're going to explore playing a Horde army. And within that framework, let's start with a definition. Most modern war games, with the exception of historicals, have this idea of a list. You and I are playing our own faction, our own army. And then within that, there's a certain power level, purchase point, some sort of system where we have a currency to each purchase the units that we want and outfit the army that we want from a list. So this way, the idea is we can play multiple different units and different ways of building the army, but at the same time, have it be somewhat balanced. Now, just for contrast, historicals will look at an event, a particular time period, a particular moment, and the armies will not be balanced or they'll be very limited. You can't take that tank because it wasn't even built yet. It wasn't even conceived yet in that moment. But again, going back to modern war games, there's this idea of a list. So if I have X number of power points, currency, whatever that's going to be, squadron points, a Horde army is where you are looking to flood the table with so many models that it does three things. The first is it's able to absorb any amount of firepower your opponent throws at you. So in a shooting phase, you killed 30 of my models or 30 of my elements, whatever that's going to be. Remove them from the table. Okay, I have 300 more. And within this element, to qualify, you have to look at the average army based on the meta, the average list based on the meta that people in your area are playing ahead of time and calculate the volume of dice that they're able to put out there. They're able to do 50 shots a turn. Can I absorb 50 shots and still have enough critical model mass to continue playing the game for a number of turns? So that's the first element in a Horde list. Is it possible to get enough models on the table based on your unit size where you can just absorb massive amounts of firepower, if necessary? The second is looking at the quality versus quantity. Now, obviously, with some war games, elite troops are going to be able to do more, but they cost more, so you get less on the table. Troops that might be non-veterans or very, very low model count, value count, where you can flood the table with these, they're not going to be as effective. You're looking for the cheapest, biggest, absolute buy-in that you can. Within that, we're also looking at volume of dice to shoot. You're looking to do the exact opposite where, yes, I might have an elite unit that on a D6 hits you on a 2 or higher, and I get a reroll. So if I roll a 1, pulling some elements from Chain of Command, late war, elite American Special Forces, to hit you, I roll a 2 or higher, and if I get a 1, special rule, I get a reroll. If I get a 1 again, then I have to accept that roll. Well, that's awesome. I'm always going to hit. But I can only have 10 of those elements on the table, 10 of those models. If I have conscripts where I can put down 100 models and I only hit you on 5s or higher on a D6 with no rerolls, I'll just flood you with dice. So I'm looking to get maximum volume of dice on the table and just overwhelm you based on the dice system. About 2 weeks ago, I pushed up to the Wargaming Tactics playlist, understanding that dice mechanic and how to break through that. So not only do I need massive amounts of models of elements, I need to be able to flood the table with dice. You can have your elite model that has massive saving throws and ward saving throws and is immune to morale checks. I'm going to throw 100 dice at it and roll them and just blast them off the table. The other aspect is area control. I need to get enough model mass on the table where you can't outmaneuver me. There's nowhere to hide. We talk about most war games, the size of the table might be a little bit different, but within that definition, generally speaking, you can't leave the table. I can't like retreat off the table, then come back on. Now, in certain wargaming systems or your system, there are some models that can leave and come back on. Like in BattleTech, air units can leave a table, then re-enter. It's this idea of they're circling back around for another pass. Sometimes you have elements that can move in and out, but generally speaking, most of the time, you're locked onto the table. So if I have hundreds and hundreds of models where I can put down 50 models in the center of the table, 50 models to the left of the table, 50 models to the right, and then all 50 models in my deployment zone in addition to that, there's nowhere for you to go. Something is going to be in range for the massive volume of dice. So I need to have that ability to flood. Two other elements to look into, and I can't name specific points of this because it's going to depend on your wargaming system. Is there a little bit of synergy where you can take a command unit or some other unit that if it's within range or it can buff, it grants elements to your Horde army? Sometimes what you'll see is like a special commander that if this commander was in a 12-inch radius, it grants Fearless, or it dispels all morale checks. And a lot of players will look and say, well, if I take a powerful unit, these elite units, and I have that commander attached or within that 12-inch radius, then I'm immune to pinning, I'm immune to checks. That makes them even more deadly. Yes. But if you attach that to a Horde unit, and I have hundreds and hundreds of models within that radius, that's just absolutely crazy. And then, of course, if there's any way to recycle units or bring them back on the table, if it's an endless wave, what special rules can you do that complement the other? A Horde army looks to flood the table with the cheapest value models and drown your opponent in models and dice. Now, on the opposite side, the practical side of doing it, and certain gaming systems, you can do a true Horde army. Other gaming systems, it's just not enough in terms of the models you can get down or the volume of dice. But the elements you kind of got to know going ahead of time is, one, physically the models. This is a miniature war game. There are models, usually 1-to-1. If I can put down 300 models, I have to acquire, build, and paint, and transport 300 models. This was a couple of editions back when Tyrannid Nidzilla was popular in 40K, and I was playing Horde armies. I could put down in a 2,000-point tournament game, I could put down real-time 500 Gaunts. And I could spawn a lot more than that. I mean, it was crazy. It was absolutely crazy what you could do. So you need to know on paper, yes, I can cook up anything and be like 500 Gaunts, 60 Gene Stealers, Hive Tyrant with Bodyguard, this and this. But you have to manifest that and build and paint and collect that. So a Horde army is something that you kind of got to plan. Second to that is playing the army itself. It's going to play a little bit slower. Physically, you're moving a lot more models. You're taking wounds, taking models off, putting models on. You have to be kind of ready for that logistics. And if you're playing competitive on a tournament scene, there is a little bit of slowdown, and it becomes a little bit more. You need to have that physical stamina. There was a time when I was playing True Horde. Okay, I was playing True Horde Tyranids. Makes Horde orcs just baby cakes, crying. Like, here's my, 150 boys. I'm like, here you go. Here's my 300 Gaunts, and I've got a whole nother case ready to go. I would play in a 3-day tournament, and no kidding, no exaggeration, Monday when I went back to work, I'm like, I can't move my arms and my back doesn't work because I spent 3 days pushing around models, leaning over a table. And I went in the opposite direction, which we're going to look at, playing an elite army, where I'm like, okay, in the next tournament cycle, I'm going to play an army with 24 models. It's going to fit in this little box. That's it. The exact opposite. Horde armies are a lot of fun, and there's some very interesting elements to it, but you want to kind of look for those three elements for the viability of a Horde army if it is in your system, because, again, we're going to be committing to massive model count, transportation, building, painting. Transportation is you got to have a case. You got to get it back and forth to the tournament, to the shop, to the gaming club. Set up, take down, set up, take down. Got to have a lot of dice. Looking for that checklist to see if it's possible.